Well, welcome to ALZ Talks, Healthy Habits for Your Brain. Thanks for joining us all today. I'm Rebecca Edelmeyer. I'm the Senior Director of Scientific Engagement for the Alzheimer's Association. I'm actually a scientist by training, and I manage many national and international research initiatives for our organization. Our team is following all of the research across the world focused on Alzheimer's and dementia science, and really keeping tabs on all of the progress that's being made. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Juan Rodriguez. Juan, would you like to introduce yourself to our guests?
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So I'm Juan Rodriguez. I'm a specialist for the Healthy Brain Initiative, which is a program of the Alzheimer's Association in partnership with the CDC. So one key focus of our public health team here at the Alzheimer's Association is risk reduction. And so I personally became interested in risk reduction after having a close family member experience, cognitive decline. And it wasn't something that I put much thought into it until I had a close family member. And so, I've always struggled with all of the information that I hear and trying to keep up with all of this latest information that we're hearing on what's best for our brain. And so it's hard to know what to do. And so I hope that by joining our short talk today, I can share some of my lived experiences on some of the things that I'm trying to improve my brain health and help improve how I feel every day. And so I'm glad that Rebecca is here with us today, and she'll get us started in going over some of the science.
No, that's right, Juan. And I think today is really meant to be a chance for us to share some of those tips that both you and I have learned, and hopefully will inspire others to take on potentially new habits or incorporate those into their healthy lifestyles. Today, we really want to talk about how healthier habits can lower risk for cognitive decline and possibly even dementia. And there's really a lot of research taking place across the globe, which continues to study what habits and factors may actually drive risk for developing these disorders. The strength of our understanding based on the research is different across all of these different risk factors, meaning we have some larger studies that help us have a clearer understanding of how the factors relate to our risk. But there's also some of the research that's on certain factors that's still very emerging, and we don't have perfect recipes or strategies yet to recommend to you. But the strongest research that we have today would suggest that risk for cognitive decline and possibly dementia can be reduced, especially by focusing on cardiovascular risk factors. And I know we're going to talk a lot about that today. So what does that really mean? Simply, it means what is good for your heart is good for your brain. So let's talk a little bit about would you say, Juan?
Is that simple? What's good for your heart is good for your brain.
It really is that simple. And it's harder to, I think, incorporate some of those habits, but I think it's a simple thing to try to remember. What's good for your heart is good for your brain. So I want to talk a little bit more about that heart-brain connection and what types of health factors support our brain health and things that you could be thinking about every day. So when we're talking about the heart-brain connection, we're talking about things like hypertension or high blood pressure, a healthy weight, things like smoking, your physical activity, diabetes, and balanced nutrition. Many of these things actually affect your heart health and your vascular health, but they're also potentially affecting your brain health. There's other factors that may drive our risk for cognitive decline and possibly dementia, things like the quality of our sleep, staying socially and cognitively engaged, even avoiding things like traumatic brain injury. I think one thing important to note is that social determinants of health may impact some or all of these risk factors, depending on each individual's situation. That's why we're sharing some tips that may work for us today, but we also want you to think what may work best for you in your environment and throughout your life and sort of your family situation. Now, when we talk about social determinants of health, I want to be sure that I'm clear about what that means. These are really health promoting factors found in one's living environment or working conditions, such as distribution of income, the influence that you may have, your wealth, rather than the risk factors themselves. And so what we hope, as I noted, is that we inspire you to think of ways to try to make small changes that may work for you in all of the conditions you may be exposed to. Research has really suggested that combining multiple healthy factors will be the most impactful for your brain. So it's not just about picking one thing. I think it's about trying to incorporate a number of activities and a number of things into your lifestyle. And it's never too early or too late to start, right, Juan?
Yeah. So Rebecca, so what you're saying is that it's not just one thing that we can focus on. It's a combination of all of these things, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think when we talk about getting into different habits, we know that drastic change can be hard for anyone. We need to talk about incorporating healthier decisions over time. These are things that affect us across our life course. So getting into new habits that you can sustain will also be important. And we really do think that these types of approaches may be valuable for everyone, even with people who may have a family history of dementia or who may be living with cognitive impairment today. So let's talk a little bit about some of those healthier habits, I would say, that are related to cardiovascular health, the ones that support our heart-brain connection. And I want to start with one. Let's talk about physical activity. I think what the research is telling us today is that sedentary behavior, sitting still, not moving, is not good for our bodies or our brains. We're learning more and more about the impact of exercise on our brains. When we think about this, people are always like asking me, well, what is it about exercise exactly that's changing our brains? And there's a number of different things. When we exercise, when we get moving about, our organs, our tissues, they release a lot of different molecules, nutrients into our bodies. They respond to exercise. It gets our blood moving and oxygenating all of our tissues. And we're learning that our blood vessels in our heart are also impacted, obviously, by physical activity. And research is suggesting that it's not just our body that's being impacted, but our brains too. And there's a lot of healthy benefits that come from being physically active, reducing severity of other health conditions, increasing your lifespan, potentially increasing longevity and resilience. And we've even seen large clinical trials that are showing us that regular aerobic exercise or even stretching and balancing activities may still stall cognitive decline in sedentary adults. So that's something to think about. It doesn't matter how you're moving or why you're moving. It just matters that, you continue to move. And we need to think about that, I think, over time. We need to think about what we can do, each and every one of us, to get moving. We don't have a perfect recipe, I would say, yet today in terms of the type of activity or the amount of time that people should be being active, but we certainly would recommend, again, many of the guidelines that support your heart health. We've heard that 150 minutes per week of physical activity is really good for your body. We also believe that it will be good for your brain. So it's not just about getting a fit body. It's about doing good things for our minds as well. Juan, do you want to maybe share some tips that you use to get physically active?
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. And so from what I'm hearing, it's not just about hitting the gym, right? There's lots of different things that we can do throughout the day to get that blood pumping and our blood going. And so, some of the things that I do, for example, is I live here in the city of Chicago. I get off a stop early when I'm taking public transit to get those extra steps in during my day, or, trying to be active during the house. So, from what you're saying is, it's not like the very specific, like only doing that exercise that can sometimes be boring, or sometimes we don't have enough time to incorporate it, but it's, incorporating into some of our daily tasks. And so, another example, I watch a lot of TV. And so sometimes when I'm watching Netflix and it eventually asks me if I'm still watching, I take that opportunity to get up and get moving. And for example, another thing that I've learned from my Puerto Rican mom is that she loves to dance and clean at the same time. And it makes her chores not be a little bit more entertaining, but it also gets her heart going. And trying to do some of those household chores are also considered that physical activity. So it's really not just about, hitting the gym. And so that's something I like to hear, especially myself. I'm not like an exercise guru. I'm not someone that necessarily has the time or the energy all the time to be devoting all these specific time to exercise. And so it's great to hear that it's physical activity and getting that heart and that blood flowing. And so, those are some simple things that I do. Rebecca, do you have any other tips of things that you've done to sort of get your heart going?
I like a lot of your tips. I do a lot of the same things too. I'm constantly looking for ways to incorporate extra steps into my day. I don't have a lot of time to necessarily get to a gym and work out for a full hour. So for me, it's a lot of conscious decisions of even taking public transportation, as you noted, that makes me walk from my house to the train. I try to walk as much as I can to run my errands, going to the grocery store. And I also think for me, I make conscious decisions too. When I'm out and about throughout my day, I take the stairs whenever possible. That really gets my heart pumping. I try to go up them quickly, but safely. But instead of using escalators or elevators when I can, I do challenge myself to do some of those things. And I think it's really important that while we're still learning what research would suggest would be the best strategy for our brains, it's not firmly established what type of physical activity. So I think just getting in a lot of minutes per week is going to be important. But I think it's also about making sure that you're incorporating activities into your lifestyle that are meaningful to you, things that you enjoy, things that are fun. And I want to give you an example because for me, I really dislike running. I know that's probably not news to a cardiologist's ears, but for me, it doesn't work well for me and my body. I love going for a really long walk, or I love doing strenuous yoga. That's a little bit more my style. So I try to incorporate those activities into my life because they're fun for me. And I keep doing them. It's not just a once and done situation. And I think we're looking for people to create routines that they enjoy and to keep them in a healthier mode, I think, over time. So maybe let's switch a little bit to another topic. I want to talk about nutrition a little bit with you. I think based on the research that we're seeing, there's a growing body of evidence that would suggest that eating a healthy diet and maintaining balanced nutrition may contribute to decreasing the risk for cognitive decline and dementia. However, I think what the research is also telling us is that there's no single food, beverage, ingredient, or vitamin or supplement that's been proven at this time to treat or cure Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia, or even to benefit cognitive function or brain health. I think what the research is telling us is that our approach should be more focused on incorporating well-balanced or heart-healthier nutrition into our everyday lives. And what we've been learning from that research is also telling us that there are some diets that have been the most studied in terms of their impact on cognition and the brain. They include diets like the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet. Sometimes that's actually an abbreviation. It's called the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension diet, and the MIND diet. Those are the three diets we've seen most of the research done when we're looking at impact on the brain. These diets have many things in common. They're high in green leafy vegetables, whole grains, fruits, beans, fish, and poultry. They're low in red meats, unhealthy fats, things that have added sugars, and foods that contain a lot of additives. And sometimes you know these as sort of the ultra-processed foods. So I want to talk a little bit about our experience, I think, with nutrition. And Juan, maybe you could share some tips maybe you and your family are using to incorporate healthier foods into your diet.
Yeah, and so this is something that I really, really struggle with. I am such a picky eater. Like, I am not a fan of vegetables. I cannot eat a whole plate of vegetables, but I, intellectually know how important they are for our overall health and for our brain. And so, some of the things that, I have been able to incorporate is every morning I've incorporated a whole serving of vegetables in my morning smoothie. It's a convenient way to get those nutrients that I need without having to, force myself to eat a whole plate of vegetables that I know that I just don't like. And, another common thing is that I also learned some tricks from my mom. She's Puerto Rican, and we have lots of really important traditional dishes that are really close to us. And so, some of the things that I learned from my mom is, doing some quick switches instead of, using a ton of brown sugar for our coquito and our café con leche. We use cinnamon and vanilla to sort of use less sugar. And then also in some of our pasteles or empanadas, which are turnovers that are very delicious, my mom, uses seafood, like fresh seafood, or uses ground turkey instead of that red beef. And, that's something that, we've been able to still have those traditional dishes, but make them a little bit healthier. And I also know that vegetables and fresh fruits and vegetables are sometimes hard to, get by. Sometimes in my house, they go bad if I, buy them all at once. And so, it helps to sort of plan ahead of, that sometimes I try to plan ahead of time. But sometimes, they do go bad. And sometimes the only way I can get those, fresh fruits and vegetables is to buy them frozen. And that's okay, right? We have to know ourselves and try not to be so serious. I've learned over the years that trying to restrict myself or trying, different diets don't necessarily always work. And though some of the things that I also have tried when I am craving those certain foods like burgers or those things that like I know that are not necessarily the best for me, I do what I call save for later. And so I take half of it and I save it for later, and I put up little barriers for myself to try to encourage myself to keep on to those healthier, habits. And that's just something that, some of the things that, I have tried. How about you, Rebecca? I know that you've, also shared struggling with nutrition and knowing what to do.
Yeah, and I really like some of the tricks that you are sharing, because I use some similar ones myself, and I have learned that completely denying myself certain foods it's not sustainable. And it gets back to a similar concept we were talking about with exercise, is you have to be able to do things that are sustainable for yourself and for your family. And so for foods, that leaves me with cravings, right? And then I go a little crazy and I maybe eat too much of one thing. But I think it really helps. I like your idea of helping with portion control. I've done that trick myself, where I take a little bit less of the thing that I know I probably shouldn't be eating, and I add additional vegetables to my plate to make sure that I'm, making sure I'm getting those nutrients in. And I always have my mom in the back of my head, because she would always used to say to me, everything in moderation. You can you take a bite, but try something else with it too. So I try to keep that in mind. And so I think, Juan, I want to cover one last topic. I think that we get a lot of questions from people around sleep. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, some of the research that's happening in the area of sleep. And then we could talk about some of the ways to maybe improve our sleep habits. So I think what we're seeing is that the research is telling us that there's an increase in evidence for sleep problems that may be both a consequence, but also a contributor to Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. And so what do I mean by that? When we think of sleep disturbances, there's many different kinds. You've probably heard of insomnia, sleep apnea, that's that sort of pulmonary obstructive disease that can occur where you're actually blocking your airways as you're sleeping. My husband's always nudging me. I'm snoring all the time. And so can we increase, we're seeing that these types of disturbances can actually increase the risk for developing dementia. We know based on the research that poor sleep is associated with increased biological changes that are actually happening in the brain that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. And these changes themselves can disrupt sleep and reduce sleep quality. So it can be sort of a chicken and the egg situation, that we are still trying to understand how sleep impacts our brains. Is sleep directly or indirectly related to these changes in the brain? Or in turn, are they contributors to the disease process or just a response to the disease? Overall, there are studies that have really found that quality of sleep, not necessarily the quantity, but the quality of the sleep is the key to our health and well-being. And when we sleep, we know that our bodies and brains are really able to repair, regenerate, and adequate sleep helps to boost a lot of other things like our immune system, improve our mood, increase our ability to learn and remember new information. So there's a lot of research that still needs to be completed so we can learn more about how sleep impacts our brains. But I think the key takeaway that we are learning is that quality sleep is more important than quantity of sleep. And so maybe we can talk a little bit, Juan, about some of the tricks that we have about improving some of our sleep habits.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing that it's about the quality of our sleep and not the quantity, because that's something that sometimes I get anxious about when I see the numbers and the amount of hours I'm, sleeping, and it can be very frustrating. And so I know that I've always struggled with like my sleep routine, and I started to realize that having a consistent sleep schedule helped me try to get to bed. And nowadays, most of us have reminders on our phone that remind us to go to bed. And so I found that to be helpful for me. But, it's also, if you needed another reason, we all always have been hearing how important sleep is, but I really took this to heart because it's yet another reason to really prioritize sleep in our day-to-day life. And so, trying to have a routine, I set up my phone to remind me to to go to bed. And so that's some of the things that I've worked. But, sleep is something that a lot of us, struggle with trying to be able to prioritize. For sure.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think, setting a time and a habit for hitting the sack is a good one. I've always luckily been a pretty good sleeper, even since I was a child. I enjoy sleep. I like going to bed, but I also recognize in this sort of busy world we live in today that we're all very stimulated. There's so many things going on, so many chores that have to be done, so many activities going on in our lives. A bedtime routine is helpful, we think. And it's trying to take that step back and make sure we're doing this for ourselves and recognizing that it's important is really, I think, key to success when it comes to getting good sleep. Some of the tips I use is I try to quiet down my electronics. I know a lot of us are attached to our phones all the time, but for me, it's about shutting down, reading a book. Unfortunately, I haven't actually finished very many books lately because they put me right to sleep, but that's really good to get my mind into that mode. I've also learned through some other reading that I've done that some of the things that can really affect your sleep, the temperature, the light, and the noise of the location where you're sleeping can be something that interferes with sleep. So there's a lot of things that you could think about looking around in your own environment to create some of those healthier options for you that incorporate ways that those environmental factors may not disrupt your sleep. And I also recommend that if you're looking for ideas, you can always reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. We do have some recommendations too on improving sort of sleep activity. And I think one important thing to note that I kind of touched on this at the beginning, but there are many reasons for sleep disruption or poor quality sleep. There's some true diagnosable disorders like insomnia, sleep apnea, and disrupted sleep disorders, but there's also some reasons why we're not able to get into good sleep routines. And think of a new parent who's juggling a new baby in the house. Think of someone who's having to work a night shift versus a day shift. All of these are potentially impacting your sleep and your circadian rhythms. So for whatever reason, you may not be getting good sleep. If you've tried to increase your quality of sleep and you're not having success, we really encourage you to talk to your doctor about your sleep issues. This is a concern because there may be solutions to aid you, solutions that help. For example, treating sleep apnea will be critical for getting you to improve your sleep and overall health.
Yeah, and something else that I've noticed when I do get enough sleep is that I'm not as irritable and I have a little bit more patience. And so that might be a little bit anecdotal, but I do know that sleep can also help improve how you feel, and not waking up drowsy in the morning is definitely a plus.
Totally agree. So I think maybe, Juan, do we have time for some questions?
Yeah, so we have some questions that are very common questions that we've been asked recently. And so one of the common questions that we've been hearing a lot lately is, and we talked about, frozen vegetables. And so are frozen vegetables considered processed foods?
That's a great question. And so sometimes you hear these terms, processed foods or ultra processed foods. So maybe I'll just touch on before we dive into even frozen vegetables, but ultra processed foods, those are ones that we know tend to be able to sit on your shelf for a very long time. Things that have a lot of added sugars, a lot of added fats, other additives that can be shelf stabilizers and such. Frozen vegetables are a slightly different story. They can last a long time in the freezer, but we would consider a frozen vegetable something to be minimally processed food because they have been harvested, they've been cleaned, they've been blanched to preserve their color and nutrition and flavor, but then they're frozen. And this process can really help to preserve the nutritional value of vegetables and make them really convenient to use for cooking. They can be a convenient, healthy option. But I would recommend always reading the ingredients on the package. I'm sure that, Juan, you've probably had that experience where you walk into the store and you're like, ooh, broccoli. Well, broccoli covered in cheese would be so much better. But think about it.
Yeah, I recently made this mistake at the grocery store. I was trying to get some frozen broccoli and for my smoothie, and I didn't see that. Like, I bought one with like a savory sauce, and I use it for my smoothies, and I'm like, when I went to pour it in, it had like the savory sauce that was like cheese paste that had a lot of sodium that I didn't even bother to read. So it is important to be checking and reading those labels sometimes.
Yep, totally agree. So frozen vegetables can absolutely be a good choice when thinking about trying to incorporate healthier foods into your diet, because we know access to fresh vegetables can be difficult sometimes. And as Juan, I think, noted when he's talking, sometimes they go bad more quickly. So I think if it works for you and your family, just make sure you're checking labels, looking for the ones that are the most minimally processed with the least additives. Those are some healthy choices for you.
Yeah, and so Rebecca, another common question that we hear all the time is, are there certain vitamins or herbs or supplements that have been shown to support brain health?
Yeah, we get this question a lot. And so let me give you sort of the research perspective that we have today. We actually follow this very, very closely through the association's research initiatives, because we certainly want there to be something that will help everyone. We want something that's going to be easily accessible, something that's affordable. But based on the evidence that we have today, we don't have any evidence that there's a single food or a beverage or ingredient or a supplement that's been proven to really treat Alzheimer's or another dementia. The research is really suggesting, I think, as I noted earlier, that our approach should be more focused on incorporating well-balanced, heart-healthy nutrition into our everyday lives. We are aware, though, Juan, I think it's important to note that there are a variety of products, including foods and supplements, that claim to be beneficial for people with Alzheimer's disease, or they may mention that they're supporting memory or brain health. And there are warnings out to consumers that they should watch out for false promises in these areas, because the research does not yet support those claims. So I think one thing that it is important to note, too, is that if people have questions about their nutrition or about a particular supplement or any type of dietary concerns that they're having, that they really should connect with their clinician, because asking your doctor about what type of vitamins, dietary supplements, or any type of other food substance that you want to be eating, that's an important discussion to have. It enables doctors to provide advice regarding nutrition, to also evaluate the potential of any of these products if you're interested in starting them, if they're going to cause any unintended side effects or interfere with any actual medications, FDA-approved medications that you may be taking.
Yeah, and so Rick, I'm glad that you brought up this idea of talking to our health provider when we are trying out any of these new supplements. I know that personally, I had recently found out that I'm vitamin D deficient. And so, something that I didn't know is that my doctor actually talked to me about supplements. And I learned that that it's important to have that conversation, not only because we want to make sure that we're safe and not the vitamins or the supplements that we're trying are not going to affect some of the things that we're already doing, but I also learned that it saved me money because I was taking vitamins that my body didn't need, and all I needed was that vitamin D supplement. And my doctor, showed me which one I truly needed. There's different types of supplements, and there's also different types of ways to inherent to consume them. And so I'm glad that I did talk to my doctor. It's something I didn't really think about before, but I, am only taking supplements that my body truly needs. And that's, important to know, because our bodies are all different and what we eat is also different. And so, a store-bought supplement sometimes might not necessarily, be what you particularly need. And so having those conversations with a clinician is helpful. And it definitely saved me money, because some of those, if you go to the store lately, some of those vitamins and supplements are really pricey.
Good points.
And so let's see here if we have any other questions. So another question that we have is, even if I don't have a family history of dementia, or if, why should I care about brain health if I myself don't have a family history?
So should we care about brain health even if they don't have a family history? I think the short answer is absolutely yes. We should all be thinking about our brains across our life course. We want to see everyone aging well. And there will be many things that we can do as we think about aging well across our life course. Incorporating a few healthier habits may make all the difference. And as I noted, I think combining multiple factors, Juan and I have been talking about this, not just one, but multiple factors into your lifestyle, is something that we really encourage, especially the ones that support your cardiovascular health. They may have the most impact on our brain health.
Yeah, I hear, I'm good, or, Alzheimer's doesn't run in my family just so many times. And, it's important that I know that eating a healthy diet and staying active are good for my brain, but, again, they're good for your overall health. And so it seems like a lot of work to focus on all of these things that we just shared. But the answer is maintaining a healthy diet and being physically active are not, only good for your brain. They're also good for how you feel. They're good for your skin. They're good for your heart. And again, overall health. So, because many of these factors, do support our brain health. And so it's important that, like you mentioned, trying to do a combination. And, similarly, staying physically active, can, like you said, improve that blood flow. So getting that blood flow going, again, is very important. Another common question I've heard is, what happens if you already have cognitive decline, or what happens if you already have dementia? Are these things still helpful?
Mm-hmm. And so there's actually a lot of research ongoing in this area. One of the large clinical trials that we saw recently was looking at exercise's impact in individuals who already had mild cognitive impairment. And that's the study I was noting to you, where they were looking at both aerobic exercise and also stretching and balancing. And they were able to show that both types of exercise were able to stall any changes in cognitive decline. But that's just one study. It needs to be reproduced. So there's a lot more research that still needs to be done. But at this time, we would recommend, again, it's never too late to start as well, because it's really good in supporting your overall health. Would you also agree with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never too late to start or too early to start as well. And so, I'm relatively, not in my 30s yet, but I'm starting now because I do have that family history, and it's something that I know it's good for my overall health in the long run. And so, the association, one of the things I want to share is that the association is here for you. We have plenty of resources. If you have any more questions about your brain health, or you wanted someone to talk to, or you wanted to talk to an expert, we do have available our 24/7 helpline that you can call. It's 1-800-272-3900. We have knowledgeable experts there that if you have any questions about your brain health, or wanted to learn more about how you can find this program, Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body, in your local community. You can also check out our educational offerings at the communityresourcefinder.org, which is a website that we have. And again, if you have any other questions or wanted to talk to anyone about some of these brain health questions, please, give us a call, and we're here to provide resources.
No, thanks, Juan, for going over all those resources. I know I've called the helpline myself many times, and I even work for the organization. So the people that help to staff our lines are just incredibly talented, and I think incredibly helpful. I think we've covered a lot of material today. Maybe the two things that I hope are key takeaways for you all is that it's never too early or too late to begin healthier habits, and to really talk with your health provider about your individual health. These are important conversations, and your brain needs to be an important part of that discussion. I want to thank Juan so much for joining us, and for all of you for joining us today. It's been a great discussion, and we hope you'll connect with us soon. Thanks all. Have a great day.